Ted Cruz attended this event that went on in Austin, Texas. We looked at a moment of Gavin Newsom previously from it, but I have a few moments to show you from it, but he got laughed at by the crowd, and it was just beautiful because it, to me, represented exactly the way that I felt listening to him say what he said, and the way that I felt hearing this criticism from so many Republicans lately about Joe Biden's speech, accurately highlighting the threat to democracy that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement pose. So I'll show you it and we'll discuss. It's so funny.
Biden stand up in Pennsylvania and give a speech bathed in red light like Emperor Palpatine. That was bizarre. Where he called half the country fascist, or I guess semi-fascist was the term he used. That's not healthy. I've never seen a president give a speech like that. And part of the reason I think...
You see, I understand, but might have...
Okay, so the part that I think tickled the crowd, we'll say, was the fact that he said, I've never seen another president give a speech like that, or never seen someone give a speech like that. Whenever his guy is Trump. Trump has given some incredibly divisive speeches throughout his time, some incredibly antagonistic towards the other side speeches. And at one point, I think I showed on this, or I sent out on one of the other social media platforms, a clip of Trump calling Democrats fascist, calling the left fascist. And it just cracks me up because they all pretend like, how could you ever use that word to describe your opposition? And then Trump used the exact same word. So we know this is all fake, whatever. They're not actually that offended by it. But there is a huge difference because you can't get mad at somebody for accurately analyzing a situation, even if the descriptors they have to use to accurately analyze that situation are harsh. It's not our fault that Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election and stay in power regardless of the fact that he lost. It's not our fault that the entire MAGA movement has gotten behind that and has made it a new pattern to deny any election that doesn't go their way and say it was stolen. That's not our fault. We're just identifying that happened. You can't get offended at us for telling you that the sky is blue, okay? I'm sorry. If you really, really want it to be red, but it's blue, you can't get mad at me whenever I tell you you're delusional. Okay? And it's a similar situation here. Everyone who's freaking out at the words that Biden used, saying it was so divisive, needs to look at themselves for a moment and think, maybe what he's saying is true. And it's scary that he has to use those types of words to accurately assess what's going on in our country right now. Now, of course, obviously all the people I'm hypothetically speaking to would never admit that those descriptors are true, but I just don't think there's any substantive argument against what Biden said and against what we've screamed about a ton on this show. And that is why they focus on the red lights. That is why they focus on how divisive it was, because they don't actually want to break down why they're not against democracy, because clearly they are. They don't want to break down why it isn't such a threat to our democratic process to have someone who tried to stay in power and try to overturn the election, and still an entire movement is standing behind those actions. They can't argue against that. So instead, they say it was really mean and it hurt their feelings. And that's what they stick to. All right, a couple more moments from Ted Cruz's interview here at the Texas Tribune event that was going on. He talks about how all Republicans are lying who are saying they don't care whether or not Trump runs when considering their own presidential ambitions, because they're all waiting, as Ted Cruz says, to see what Trump says.
Oh, look, everybody's waiting to see what Trump decides. And the reality is he's going to do what he wants to do. I don't know if he's going to run for president. Nobody else does either. One of the prerogatives, he's the former president, one of the prerogatives of someone who's a former president is he gets to decide. He gets to make his own decision. Nothing you say, nothing I say is going to influence him, I think, pro or con. He's going to make his own decision, and the rest of the world will react to it. I think we'll find out sometime next year. There are some Republicans who are beating their chest and running around saying, I'm running no matter what. It doesn't matter what Trump does. That's utter garbage. They're all lying. Like, it does matter. Yeah.
So funny enough, it does matter. And he's correct about that. It's silly when Republicans pretend like they don't care. Oh, I'll just make my decision independent of that. No, They are all waiting to see what Trump does to decide what they will do. But it's funny to see Ted Cruz as somebody who on the 2016 primary stage was all aggressive towards Trump, talking about how bad he was, and he was so proud and strong as a presidential candidate, and now he has to just sit in the wings and wait for Trump to tell him what he's allowed to do. Super funny. And then here's one moment where he gets heckled. Someone says violence doesn't stop violence, and this is his response when talking about gun violence.
In these debates, look, if we sit down reasonably and say, how can we stop crimes? You would rationally say, well, let's look at both the criminal uses of firearms, but also the defensive uses of firearms that stop crimes. That
is an argument.
It actually is the only thing that does. If you look at violence doesn't solve violence, look, that's actually why the left wants to abolish the police, and it's why you see...
Okay, if you ever hear someone say the left, and that's how they leave it, wants to abolish the police, you can just never believe anything they say ever again. Because I would bet you a single-digit percentage of the left wants to abolish the police. It's probably like 1%, and they don't even really know what they mean by that. Okay, maybe they do. I'm not insulting them. Whatever. I think that's a stupid idea. But a lot of times what they mean is like replace it with a new type of policing. Yeah, police would be there in some form or another. It just might be restructured. But either way, I think that slogan, I think that concept is dumb. You need to fix the institution we have already. You don't need to throw out the entire concept, the baby with the bathwater, as people say. But people like to do this and characterize the entire left as believing what like a handful of people believe. And of course, I'm sure this is done to the right at some points in time, but I think it's a little bit more dramatic going right to left, because I try to recognize whenever one person's view is representative of an entire block of people's views. So when I talk about the radical far right, that's not me trying to select the most crazy part of the right and say, this is the entire right. No, wait. I'm talking about Trump, who still is the most popular individual in the Republican Party. So it's not unfair for me to characterize the right as being the wrong things with Trump, right? Because he really is representative of much of the right and the views and the people they support. Pretending like the left wants to abolish the police is silly, and his statement that violence is the only thing that stops violence, that's not true either. But of course, at some point you do need violence to stop violence. But flooding the streets with more guns is not the way to do that. So there is Ted Cruz. Best moment, absolutely, was the first one I saw, or first one I showed you, where he gets laughed at by the crowd.